Talk shoes. Recorded live.
All right, we'll just get time for people to get back in here on what we're doing. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you what we were talking on the previous show, the system wants to make you jump through hoops whenever you beat them. They don't want to shell out because it cuts into their slush fund. It cuts into their retirement because now they have to dig out of that retirement. And the thing is, they've got interest and stuff on this, and they don't want to break down the interest side of this. So they don't really want to give it out. That's part of the problem we're running into. But I got some ideals I'm going to put out to you on this, on us going head to head with these people and going, because someplace down along the line here, they're going to have to back up. But it's going to take knowledge. It's going to take understanding on our side of this fence on how to go do this. It's going to take us. So it's like I said, but we've come closer because of the information I have received from different people that have sent me information, the research I've done on my own, and I tell you what, this has probably got them more upset with me than anything else, because a lot of these whistleblowers, like Karen Hudis, where she went in and she blew the whistle, she worked within the system. This Snowden, his whistleblower, he is working within the system because he was part of the system. Ladies and gentlemen, the stuff that I have come up with has either been given to me by you or my own personal research, but it has been gotten out of their books. Their books is where we've got all this stuff from. This is where we have learned all this information. It's to the fact that Carl and I have been going into D.C. when we go up there and we get into the Library of Congress, and we would sit here and research the Library of Congress. Carl and I would go sit here and we would lobby the congressmen. We would sit here and knock on their doors. We would go talk to them. And I think this is what's got them more upset, because they've never had anybody ever sit down and put the pieces together in the fashion that we put it together and then lay it all out, because it's like we've talked here in previous shows. We started out on a end table for information. Then we went to a card table. Then we went to a coffee table. And we went to a dining table. We went to a ping pong table, a pool table. We've gone out here to a football field. We went out on an aircraft carrier. Now we got the whole world covered up, and I'm looking for another world to keep continuing putting all these pieces together. We haven't had anybody out here within the ranks that were willing to work together and be willing to have an open mind to share information. So much of the stuff was right on target on what they said until you went back and asked the question. You said it, show me where it's at. They couldn't. They couldn't show you where this stuff was at. Even though it may have been true, they could not show you where it was at. And this is why, for the longest time, Harvey knows, because he's done enough of my paperwork, I would never use a flesh and blood man with a soul on any of my paperwork. That would never hit my paperwork. Why? Because I could not prove the trust side of the birth certificate until here recently. Until we got into that Washington, D.C. statute under Vital Statistics, Chapter 2, under section 7-201, paragraph 10, what it sits down and says it classifies a person as a trust, as an estate, as an association, as a corporation, as a joint stock company, as an insurance company, as a district government, as agencies or instrumentalities of that district government. Ladies and gentlemen, this does not say one thing about flesh and blood. It does not say one single thing about flesh and blood. It talks about everything but flesh and blood. This has always been the problem. And same thing under Title 26, under that 7701 IRS, it went back in and it defined a person under IRS as a trust, as an estate, as everything but flesh and blood. So what we're finding in these court cases, or I should say in these statutes at large, and in the USC codes, we are not finding anything that comes in and talks about the real breathing flesh and blood setup, because what it gets into under that definition under Washington, D.C., is that it says live birth means the complete expulsion or extraction from mother, as if it is not human, as if it is not flesh and blood. It is it as an entity, as a dog, as a sheep, as a fish, its mother. That does not say one thing about being human. So when you get down into the definition of the word person, and what it gets into, it does not say flesh and blood. It does not say one thing. And for what we have pulled out of Title I, under USC Code Section 1, it says words donating numbers, genders, and so forth. And it gets into the word person and whoever. Persons or whoever includes corporations, companies, associations, firms, partnerships, societies, and joint stock companies, as well as individuals. Well, Rod, right there it is. No, sir, let me explain something to you. You and I have been deceived in such a fashion that if I was to sit here and say German Shepherd, every one of you knew what I would be talking about. It's a dog. It's what it is. But when you come down to the legal system, that German Shepherd is no longer what you and I were taught out here in the world. It has an entirely different meaning. The legal system has given every word that you and I would understand and a different definition in order to manipulate, trick, deceive, and to sham you and scam you into a fact that, well, Your Honor, Mr. Klaus here, are you saying that you're not a person? Well, under your normal understanding, yes, I am. He is not telling you the definition of the word person has been modified to an entirely different meaning that doesn't mean living, breathing human being. They don't have to tell you this. And the moment you make an issue on it, then they want to sit down and say, well, wait a minute now. Bottom line boils down to your legal definitions are spelled out in your book. You show me. I don't have to sit here and prove to you you're the accuser. It is up to you. The burden of proof is on your side of this fence. So when it sits here and says under Title I, USC Code under Section 8, persons, human being, child, and individuals as including born alive infants. All right? It gets 10 and says, in determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulations, or interpretation of the various administrative bureau and agencies of the United States, the word person means human being. Okay, we understand what a human being is outside of our system. We know what a child is, an individual. Shall include every infant. Members of the species called Homo sapiens, who is born alive at any stage of development. Okay, now, problem we have here, that word person goes right into what I told you in part 1. Corporations, companies, associations, firms, partnerships, societies, joint stock companies, trusts, estates, officers, and employees of corporations, and many other things here. Where does this? See, they changed the definition. And that's the whole argument here going into court. When a judge sits there and says, are you telling me that I don't have jurisdiction of the word person? The first words out of your mouth is, no, sir, you most certainly do not. That's the last word should ever come out of your mouth. The first word should come out of your mouth is, yes, sir. Under your legal definitions, you have absolute authority, and I do not debate that with you, that a person, you have control over that person as it is defined as an estate, a trust, a corporation, an insurance company, a joint stock share. It is an officer and employee of a corporation. It is a partnership. These are your legal definitions. Would you please tell me where it says the living flesh and blood man? Because it doesn't refer back to that. Are you telling me that I don't have control over the man? This court doesn't have jurisdiction over the man? No, sir. I would never tell you that, because under Title VII, under Section 136, you've got full control over the man as he is defined as an animal. Now, are you going to classify me as an animal, or are you going to classify me as a living, breathing soul, as a man, creation of God? Which one am I? Ladies and gentlemen, they will trick, manipulate. At the moment you sit down and say you don't have jurisdiction of the word person, he now has nailed you because he has it over any inanimate object. But the moment you hit them up with the flesh and blood of a man with a soul, there's nothing in here that gives them over the living being. Everything is inanimate. We're being nailed through threat, coercion, intimidation, and bodily harm if we don't agree.
And greed.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now, you better, before you go playing in this field, I have talked to people today when we start going through some of this stuff, within minutes after we've talked, they've lost their train of thought on this. I've had to come back in and bring it back up. You do not get that same courtesy sitting in a court. You do not get that second chance, because the first comment is what they're going to nail you on. Now, they want to play ignorant. They want to play stupid on their side. Well, this is frivolous. This is unintelligible. Excuse me, sir. Let's back up here. Obviously, you've never read your books. Because I didn't pull this out of thin air. I pulled this out of your written books. Well, we don't go by them. Oh, we don't go by them. Then how and what are you charging me under if it isn't by these books? Because every one of your charges starts out with the word person, and it goes back in and defines that person. It uses the word individual, but there's no definition for the word individual other than for a human being or child or an infant. And the definition of the word human being is Homo sapient, which is defined as a monster or an animal. And an infant or child is defined under the canon rules of law under 97 as a child below the age of 7, as a minor. It does not say adults, does not say man, does not say woman. It says a minor under 7. That is how an individual is listed, as a minor. Would you please tell me how this applies to me? As I am over the age of 7. Ladies and gentlemen, the burden of proof is on their side of the fence, on that corpus delicti. That corpus delicti is a issue, and the judge can't claim, are you saying that this court doesn't have jurisdiction? Well, Honor, before we answer that, does the prosecutor or did the prosecutor give you the jurisdiction, or are you taking it without prosecution giving it to you? Because he is supposed to lay out the definitions of all this stuff, and I didn't hear one word of definitions from this man. You are assuming something here that I have yet to see that the prosecution has given you. I thought justice was supposed to be blind, and I thought justice was supposed to have a set of scales and was supposed to be a neutral party. I did not realize that the prosecution gave you a hood and a lever and a rope. This is not going to go over too well. But the judge is supposed to remain neutral in all of this. He is to remain neutral. But we find them assisting the prosecution because the prosecution is dumbfounded with so much of the stuff that we're bringing in that he now has to cover up for them and make up for their shortcomings. But see, we got several issues here, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Out of the corpus delicti hearing, it would be better if we did the in-camera hearing. And I'm going to tell you why. If you do it behind closed doors, the judge is not put out in the public face in public works to where he can sit back and say, okay, prosecution, boy, have you screwed up. You're not going to humiliate the judge if you bring him into his chamber privately and sit down and start laying out the issues that the prosecution failed to bring a corpus delicti in the courtroom. They have to bring in an injured body. Then the prosecution is going to sit down and say, well, Your Honor, the defendant broke the statutes. He broke the law, the written law. Whoop, excuse me, time out. Let's take a break here a minute. Mr. Prosecutor, do you really and truly want to come back in and make an issue before this court that I broke a written law? Well, you most certainly did. Okay, let's talk about your side of this fence here before we get to mine, because I'm going to remind you that you're under an oath, and you're under a contract for wages and compensation and benefits when you took your job. But we're going to remind you of your oath that you're under. Now, your oath requires you to uphold and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and protect my rights. Your job is to uphold legislation laws. let's sit here and talk about, because you walked in here and you brought these claims, as we're talking about statutory violations here because laws were broken. Let's talk about the perjury side of Title 18, 921, of you taking a false oath that you would have honest service and be honest in this courtroom. That's a felony. Let's talk about Title 18, 1346 of Honest Service Clause. Let's talk about Title 18, 1001 of you putting false information before this court. Let's talk about Title 31 under 3729 of false claims, and you are accepting wages and benefits and compensation under a fraudulent oath, and you swindled off of the government. Let's sit here and talk about Title 18, Chapter 115, under 2382, 83, 84, 86, 87 of sedition, treason, insurrection. Don't you think we need to address your criminal activity first before we talk about mine? Oh, by the way, did you not take an oath to the bar that you would not mislead, misrepresent, misconstrue, and put false information before the court? Because if you did, this was enough to have you disbarred. So I think we need to really talk about your criminal activity before we talk about mine. Because if we're going to talk about statutory violation, then let's talk about statutory violations on your side of the fence, because you didn't come in here with clean hands. So now, what is the corpus delicti again? Ladies and gentlemen, you've got avenues here. If you go back and read Title 18, 1001, it specifically applies to legislation, it applies to the executive branch, and it applies to the judicial branch of them putting false information into any hearing. But, ladies and gentlemen, that corpus delicti hearing is something that we have missed out on, and we never gave it much thought. But it wasn't until I found the birth certificate that it defined us as a trust and as an estate and as an insurance company, as a joint stock company, as part of the government under the district. I didn't realize we had all this stuff going for us, and I don't understand why we're broke. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, there's avenues here that we could turn around and start using. And the judge is going to come up and possibly sit down and say, well, I think you need to have a psychological evaluation. Oh, excuse me, let's take a minute here. We just talked about that you've got jurisdiction over the person, which is corporations and all this other stuff, over all the dead things. Are you now acknowledging that I am alive and well and I'm not lost? That I now am a living man and that the living man needs to go see a psychiatrist? You have now acknowledged me that I am alive? Now, before we go make a trip, should not the prosecutor bring in the law that shows where you can require a living man to have a psychological evaluation? Because we're making the issue here that you have absolute control over the person, because it is a corporation, it's an association, it's a trust, it's an estate, it's an employee of a corporation or an officer of the corporation, it's a partnership, and it's all these wonderful things. But, we're still missing that one thing here. It doesn't say flesh and blood. So how can you ask me to get a psychological evaluation when, what heading are you using this under? The word person? We just talked about it. Man? We just talked about it. Human being? Well, we just talked about it because it's an animal. So how does any of this apply to me? Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to get quicker on our feet than what we are. We've got to start thinking ahead of time. Not to start taking our time and don't be in such a hurry dealing with this stuff because they are here to manipulate and trick and deceive. And how many times have we had different guests or we've had people on here that has come in and stated that when they got into this, all they did was turn around and walked out the door, and as long as they did not answer or acknowledge the judge, the case got dismissed because now, the moment you agree to a psychological, you now gave jurisdiction to the judge again. These people are through deceit, trickery, and manipulation and under threat of bodily harm and duress. And this is how they're hammering us. Through fear. There's no honor and integrity on that side of the fence. What you do, ladies and gentlemen, think before you do, because you are the one that is in that situation. Not me, not Harvey, not Carl, and not 146 other people on this call. You're the one that's in that courtroom. Your decision is based on what you think that you need to do to what is best for your situation.
God, Ron, that reminds me that way back, all that foreclosure stuff, that Karen Tamper case, I guess she's still in jail. That guy out there in Idaho, I'm trying to remember his name, he went into jury trial, and every time the judge or prosecutor or they tried to ask him a question, the only thing he would say is, I'm not honoring what you're saying, you don't have jurisdiction over me, and he got like a year or two in jail out of all that. But he never explained to the court on record why the judge didn't have jurisdiction.
Well, see, where we're messing up, and it's taken me a long time, and from listening, the number one teaching out here is never acknowledge the name and never claim the name. Ladies and gentlemen, that's been our biggest mistake, but we never knew how to come back in and address the issue. So we was going by what we have been taught. Now, it's like we sit here and talked on our last show. And Harvey and I talked about this on that document for the Corpus Delicti, on why I had the all caps name with the standard name and the lower case with the dots and dashes and the lower case with the father's family name of class. Why did I put the all caps in this thing? Why am I claiming it? Because under the Corpus Delicti hearing, ladies and gentlemen, that all capital name shows up. So now, because it came off of your birth, that's the only place that name could come from. From the time that you got expelled out of your mother, extracted, the moment they did a birth certificate, that name now became a trust, became an estate to the state under the Social Security Act of 1935. Now, I want to get into a little detail here on this, because part of what some of you are missing and lack understanding, and maybe this will help clear some of it up. The moment you was born alive, at that time, you had to be given a name. The moment you was given that name, it was put down on the live birth certificate. The moment it was put down on that live birth certificate, you was given a Social Security number for the state to obtain federal grant money on behalf of that name. Now, the point being is it now became the trust for the state for them to operate under. You hold the name of that trust. So when they call the trust in, drag the trust in, really what it boils down to is that judge is nothing more than a mediator. He's in the probate court. He's here to probate. The attorney's office, which is the Attorney General of the state, wants to sue the state. They want to sue the trust name. In order to sue the trust name, in order to get into the account, they have to have your approval or your permission. So what they do is they drag in a lawyer on your behalf.
Trustee.
Yep, a trustee. Sit down and they debate the trust because you are trust and you have not been declared alive. You're still deceased or lost. The trustee now agrees to allow the state to sue the trust. So now they are now embezzling off of the state, that the state already had the money. Now this goes into the judges and the prosecutors and the lawyers' pocket for retirement.
All right, Rod, quick question, if I might.
Go ahead.
Is the trustee that says that the state can sue the trust?
The trust.
Are we still considered the trustee, or what?
All right, the attorney. All right, the Attorney General is the trustee. Okay, because he's working for the state. The state's got the money. He represents the state. He represents the trust. But he can't play two positions here. He can't be the suer and the suee.
Oh.
Picture it this way. Here Harvey wants to sue Harvey. So Harvey's going to go hire a lawyer to represent Harvey, while Harvey gets a lawyer to defend Harvey, to sue Harvey.
Huh.
This is what they've done. The judge is the mediator in this. He's the catalyst to sit down to make it legitimate, while the Attorney General comes in and sues the trust name to embezzle the money out of the Social Security account that the state has in their possession. In order to tap that account, they have to bring in another attorney for an opposing side to sit down and to agree to hand over a portion to what looks like a trial, but is nothing more than a sham. You follow me?
Sort of. I mean,
well, that's what they do in all bankruptcy cases. If you file Chapter 13 or 11 or 12 or whatever in federal bankruptcy court, that's the first thing they do is the damn judge issues a trustee.
What do you mean, issues a trustee?
The judge orders a trustee over the bankruptcy proceedings of your life, your assets, your whatever.
All right, so he assigns a trustee.
Yeah, that's the first thing the judge does, is assigns a trustee to the estate, which you're still alive.
All right, but who was the trustee of this estate, of this trust, before the judge in the bankruptcy court assigns another trustee?
I don't know.
The original trustee, whenever the government gets the Social Security grant money, it goes through the governor and the Attorney General's office. They have to sign for it, okay? So if they are the receiver, they are the trustee of the trust money. Now, they want to get into it. The Attorney General cannot bring a case in and then sue and then turn around and play the counterpart in this. So they have to appoint another trustee over the fictional name, because the Attorney General's coming in on behalf of the state, so they got to put another trustee over the trust to make it look legitimate in order for them to sue, and then the lawyer, which is the trustee over the all caps name that's being brought in there, waives the trust for it to be sued and embezzled off of.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, you talk about convoluted. That's convoluted.
Well, that's the whole thing. See, the bottom line is the government, the state, already has the money because it was given to them under the birth certificate through the Social Security account. Okay, can we agree on that? Yes, no?
Yes, we'll agree on that.
Okay, so if the state was already given the money,
But they were given the money in the name of the trust, right?
the name of the trust for them to operate under,
Okay.
it's already in their possessions to operate, correct?
And they are the
Trustees.
And they are the trustee of the trust. Okay, yep.
For that all capital name.
Mm-hmm.
What they're supposed to be doing is discharging the debt whenever the live person with that same name comes up, because that money given to the state on behalf of this live person, the state has to discharge all his debts, but they're not doing that.
Yes, I understand that. They are, yes, and they're making us pay a debt that the trust should offset.
Granted. Now remember something here. Let's walk through this. Because the government is being paid by the trust on behalf of the people. And this is what is happening here. Because we were born, we got a certificate of birth, the government put an X amount of dollars on our value each fiscal year to be turned over to the state to run the state. So now the state employees are being paid through our trust to function. So now they are receiving the benefit of us. We're not receiving any benefits from them because it was us being born, us getting a certificate of live birth, them putting a dollar value on us, them paying the state. So now the state is receive of money because of us.
Absolutely. If we weren't born, they wouldn't have any money.
Exactly. So now what is going on is if the state would turn around and use that money to pay our debts and to run their office, we would not ever see a jail time. But what has happened is this. The lawyers have got together and say, okay, we can steal money out of this man's trust, and he's stupid. He would never figure it out because we will keep this a secret. What we will do, we will have the police officers out here snag one of these guys. We will bring a claim against the trust in the name of the state. So we will have the Attorney General's office represent the state, bringing a claim of injury that the trust occurred on the state, but to make it look good, we now have to have a lawyer for the other side to represent the trust. And we'll bring the citizen in, and he'll never know the difference.
Yeah. It's a perfect plan, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So now we will have the attorney agree to allow us to embezzle money out of that trust so we can put it into our retirement fund, or we can put it on the stock market, and we can sit here and sell the name, and we'll go right back into the Ponzi scheme like they did on the mortgages. And the living man would never know the difference because it's never been explained to him, and he's stupid.
Well, yeah, and they'll take money from the trust, and then they'll say that we owe them even more money.
Yes. Now, I got into a conversation with a gentleman here today, not today, but here in the last couple of days, and majority of you people are making a very serious mistake. And I'm going to sit here and show you how, and I'm going to explain it to you. You are under the impression that we accept benefits and gratuities off of the government. Anytime you get a Social Security check or VA check or you get food stamp, that's a benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, if it wasn't for you being born, getting a certificate of birth, getting a number, and being paid for being born alive, and that money being given to the state, there would be no such thing as Social Security or food stamps or anything else, because, number one, you are the creator. You are the ones, through your being born, and then as you get older, because you're working, you are now generating jobs for the government.
Yeah.
Now, those who hold public office are the ones who are accepting gratuities and benefits, not you and I, because they don't hold a job. They hold a government job. They're supposed to be working on our behalf. Their wages is because of our birth certificates. Granted, they have theirs too, but they went over to the government side of this thing. They're the ones that's receiving the benefits, not you and I. And the problem we're having is I talked to a couple people, and we've had them on the show here, and I got into a couple of rounds with several of these people. You have to prove that you are absolutely self-sufficient for the government in order for them to deal with you. And when you get back and you talk to these people, what they have done is this. I'm going to make a trust up, and I'm going to make Harvey or Carl the trustee over my trust. My vehicles are going to be in their name. My home is going to be in their name. My electric, my water bill, my phone bill, my grocery bill is all going to be in Harvey's and Carl's name. So now I have the absolute appearance that I am self-sufficient. I don't need the system. Now, wait a minute. You have just now become totally rely on Harvey and Carl to sit down and pay your bills, buy your groceries, pay your insurance, drive you around, put gas in your car. You're not self-sufficient when you are relying on one of us to sit down to give you that appearance. We are already self-sufficient because the day that we were born, the government was already given money on our behalf for us to be self-sufficient.
Then why aren't we?
Because they have embezzled and swindled us out of this thing through fraud and deception by listing us as an estate and not telling us this. Their trustee side of this thing is in fraud. So now the issue comes down to this. You want to go back and bring a claim against these people. We now have to bring a claim against them, naming their all-capital name. And I'm working on some paperwork on this, and you and I are going to get with us on some of this. But if we go back and list them in their all-capital name as a government-registered trade name, and technically we are supposed to be the registered agent for this as well, but if we would list their name as a capital registered trade name and go back and list them as a registered agent on behalf of that name, and we go back and point out that they are in breach of contract under wages and compensations and benefits under a public office as a living, breathing human being, under contract to a public office and we go back and sue them, now the question comes up is this. As you are a tax agent and you are a living being, is it not true, as you work for the state, that my certificate of birth is considered a trust and an estate registered to the state of Wyoming, whatever? And is it not true that the Social Security Act of 1935 up through today has granted the state amount of money on behalf of me being born every fiscal year? You want to see the proof? Here it is. Would you please explain why you are not discharging the debt, and where is this money at now? What happened to this money from all these birth certificates, as we have close to 8 million or 20 million people in this state, and each fiscal year the state gets X amount of dollars? Would you please explain where this money went and why the bills are not being paid?
And why I have to pay my bills?
Exactly. This is something that we've talked about, but we've never come close enough until, with what we've discovered, that we could actually prove that the birth side of this thing is considered a trust and an estate. Until we found that, we could not really come back and prove it. Now we're sitting on the proof. Now we're also sitting on the proof that that certificate of live birth, the state has obtained X amount of dollars for that live birth each fiscal year. So now, where is that money, and why aren't bills being paid? And why are we being hammered to pay when they've already have it in their possession to start with?
Now, Rod, wouldn't the answers to these questions come under discovery?
Yes, it would. Now, this comes into another issue where you're talking about discovery. Let's sit here and say that you're talking about a child support case. You're being drug in. Your Honor, you're saying that I'm not paying my child support. Well, you're required to pay $195 every week. Oh, excuse me. First off, let's bring in the corpus delicti. Let's bring in the corpus delicti on this.
Which or who would be what?
Which would be either, you got a name here. Now, we need to discuss, is this corpus delicti, is it considered a trust or an estate that the state claims that is registered to where they have received federal grant money on behalf of this name? Have they received federal funding? Because here it says so in the statutes at large under acts of Congress and the Social Security Act and in the Social Security laws. The state has received X amount of dollars on behalf of this name. Maybe you'd like to explain why the state hasn't paid anything.
And that would be the discovery you're asking for.
Exactly. Do you see where this could really run into an issue now that we have discovered this and start exposing this, and every time we walk in on a child support case or we walk in on a banking foreclosure and this stuff starts coming up and we start nailing them on this?
Yeah, well, can't they just dismiss the charges against you for the non-payment of child support for the non-payment of your mortgage?
Exactly right. They can turn right around and dismiss it because now they don't want this on the record.
Right. Now that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But one of these days they're going to have to. One of these days they're going to have to stand and deliver.
Exactly. But see, until we, us, the people, until we get an understanding on this and walk in here and go head to head and bring these points up, because every single case, it doesn't matter whether it is a on a traffic ticket. It doesn't matter whether it's on a foreclosure. It doesn't matter whether it's on child support. It doesn't matter whether it is a divorce. It doesn't matter whether it is a criminal activity. And I really, really hate this. But ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a choice. Even on a criminal activity. What we're going to end up doing with this, ladies and gentlemen, is this. We're going to force the other side to start changing their attitude toward now the state of Ohio is here on behalf of Mary Jo Smith, who the defendant over here ran over and killed her husband. So we aren't here on behalf of Mary Jo Smith representing her in this courtroom. So now when the injury comes down, she is going to get the benefits out of this and no longer the state. Because now they're not going after the trust. Now, because the defendant may know something about the trust, now they're going to have to take the money out of the trust to pay her.
For the injury.
For the injury. Because now he can bring up, well, wait a minute, corpus delicti time, corpus delicti. You're charging the all-cap name here. Let's talk about the corpus delicti. Now, this is the criminal, okay? The criminal now can come in and ask for a corpus delicti hearing. Who are you charging here? Are you charging the trust name, which has the money, at which point go ahead and take the money out and reimburse her for the loss? If you're going to charge me, then you can't tap the account. If I got to go to jail, you cannot have the money and the account both.
And me in jail.
Exactly. But ladies and gentlemen, this through what we've discovered, what I'm looking at, and I want you people to think about it real hard of what we're saying, because now that we could go back and prove that the birth is a trust, and it is an estate, and it's registered, and we could go back and prove that the state has received grant money for that name on behalf of that person, on behalf of that birth certificate. They now, if we start pushing this, they now would have to start showing where all this stuff is at if they collected each fiscal year on behalf of that certificate of birth. I'm 60. That means for the last 60 years, they have collected X amount of dollars under my name, under that trust that is sitting in the state. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, when you go from state to state, this is why they require you to register yourself so that account can be transferred to the next state that you have resided in.
And they normally do it through the driver's license, getting a new driver's license, getting a new address, this, that, and the other thing, right?
Yes, this way you get proof that you've actually changed residency and you have registered yourself. Because this is the way this is how it's set up. As you register yourself, then that money now goes from, if you lived in Ohio originally and you went to Kentucky, that now gets registered from Ohio down to Kentucky, so Kentucky receives the benefit of your certificate of birth for you living there, so that they would get the money on behalf of.
Now, the proof of the trust, is that in that DC codes thing that was in the trust folder?
Yes. Because it classified you once you were born. It never classified you as something living and breathing. It classified you right off the bat as a trust and an estate.
Okay, for those people that are listening, in the big list today, there is a link to all of the documents from the trust call, which was, what is today, the 18th? The trust call was when? Was that Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Right. So the documents that we're talking about, the DC codes concerning the birth certificate, registration, this, that, and the other thing, is in the big list as a link. It'll take you to the Dropbox place, and you'll see I don't know how many documents there are 10 or 12 documents in the folder, and click on the DC birth registration codes, and that's where you're going to see them calling us an estate, right, Rod?
Yep, and a trust.
And a trust.
And if you will get into Title 26 USC code under IRS, and that is also in there under 7701, it defines a person again as a trust and an estate. Because I went in, and it's in that folder, I believe it is. I've added some more stuff to it, and I got to get it out to you. But we've went in and pulled up the definition of the word person, and we put the definition in. But under the DC Vital Statistics, Chapter 2, 7-201, Section 10, and under Title 26 USC Code 7701, in the list, it defines a person as a trust and as an estate. There's the proof.
So it's in IRS and in the DC code.
Exactly.
So there's your two places where you can say, hey, Mr. Judge, I got the trust, right?
Exactly. Are you defining me as a trust in this courtroom? Are you defining me as property of the state?
Right. And then the judge will either have to say yes or no, or case dismissed.
Exactly. He may not want to go here. That's irrelevant. No, it's not irrelevant because we are here to talk about the corpus delicti. The corpus delicti has to be a real breathing, living flesh and blood, which I'm now asking you to declare, am I a living flesh and blood man with a soul? Am I alive? And the judge, I'm telling you, from what we are hearing on this, they're going sideways.
Yes, and the reason they're going sideways is because of what you told me yesterday.
Yep.
Concerning
they're
the
going
other
sideways
case.
because they know there is nothing in the USC codes or any of their stuff. There's nothing in there that gives them jurisdiction over the flesh and blood living soul. It only gives them jurisdiction over individuals, persons, human beings, and man, which has an entirely different definition than what you and I were taught. But through fraud and deception and deceit, they've changed the definitions, but they never told you and I what they changed it to. So when they come up and say, do you say I don't have jurisdiction over the person? Well, yeah, you got jurisdiction over the person. Good. Now, you just handed him jurisdiction because you did not know any different.
Correct. Where in reality, he only has jurisdiction over this trust, correct?
Yes. All the artificial stuff.
Right, correct. Made up.
No, you don't have jurisdiction over the person. And when you're telling that judge no over the person, you mean the living flesh and blood man.
Not the government definition of a person.
Yes. So when you tell him no, then he's going to turn around and nail you because he did not come back in and define the difference with you because he doesn't have to because he can play the game.
Hmm.
You need to know the language, and that's one thing that I was taught whenever I got into this. The gentleman that taught me said, Rod, you need to understand the language. You need to understand the definitions of what they're using. Because once you understand their definitions of what they're using, now you can play the game with them. But you have to understand the definitions of what is going on here. And ladies and gentlemen, it takes time to go back in to learn this stuff. But
to understand it and accept it as this is what the reality in their paradigm is.
Exactly, because right now, what is going on is this. If we can start bringing this stuff up and they start realizing they're losing, they're going to get nastier and nastier and nastier through intimidations, through threats, through coercion. Because once the people start understanding this and this starts swamping them, they're now liable for major, major lawsuits, because now once you start suing them in their flesh and blood capacity under breach of contract, under work compensation and benefits as a public office, because you're not suing that public office now, you're suing that living man under a contract that took that public office, they're now got no place to run. This is why in North Carolina, when we did this, this is why the court came out and ruled they're not public officials. They're purely private individuals. They're purely private entities. They put them on the human blood side of this thing in order to relieve the state. This is part of how I put this together.
So it all kind of grew out of them using that as their gambit, their ploy, not to have the state be responsible. Oh, no, they were private contractors, right?
Exactly. They put them over on the private side of this thing. So now if we was to bring them in their flesh and blood side under breach of the contract for honest service for holding a public office, we now could go after them, and they can't claim immunity because we're not suing the state. We're suing you for breach of your contractual duties under wages and compensation for that job that you were giving as a flesh and blood man, not as a corporate employee. This is going to open up another can of worms on these people.
As I say, it's very convoluted.
Yeah, it is. And they did a good job.
I mean, this was very well planned out on their part, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It's, like I said, it's taken us a long, long time to be able to get through and sift through this. But because of their books, because of their documents, because of some of the paperwork that some of us has filed and what we shared for information, it has allowed me to go through and decipher and figure a lot of this stuff out on how they did it and what the next steps is. Like I said, it's taken a while, ladies and gentlemen, for us to be able to get to this point. It's taken us quite a while for us to get. It's
taken us years.
Yeah.
But it's worth it, isn't it, if we finally get close to the end of the game?
Exactly, because it's like Richard Cornforth stood here and said, and Carl knows Richard Cornforth personally, but Cornforth was, in all his seminars, he brought up, if 80,000 people put a stop to prohibition, 80,000 people hit federal courts. If we had that same 80,000 people or plus would turn around and bring lawsuits against these public officials in their flesh and blood capacity for breach of their duty. Oh, okay. In breach of their duty on this, and go after them, but name them in their all-capital name as a government trust, and this man here is the registered agent for that name. So now he can be held accountable. This way we made a distinction between the all-cap name, because we're going to list it as a registered government trade trust name, and we're going to make the individual name as a flesh and blood real man that we're going to bring in, or woman that we're going to bring in and sue. Now they can't fall back on that flip-flop like they've been falling back on.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you get them in both capacities.
Exactly. You get them in both capacities. You name the all caps as a government registered trust trade name, and then you come back in and make them the registered agent for that, and you bring them in their flesh and blood side, now you got them on both sides. It's no longer a diversified lawsuit. It's now flesh and blood against flesh and blood. You follow me?
Well, us suing them is the flesh and blood, and then suing them in their living capacity, that's the other flesh and blood. But then you also have their capacity as their being a government official, their government trade name. So it's us two. It's us going against the living, along with their government trust capacity.
Correct.
Okay.
I realize that first this may sound a little complicated, but if you stop and think about it, with what we have done, we have now pierced their immunity and pierced their veil on this thing. Because now we're bringing them in as a flesh and blood against flesh and blood for breach of that public office that they was under a contractual agreement for, that they've already received compensation and wages and benefits. Now we could go back and nail them like we would sue the neighbor. There's a lot here, but before you people start jumping on some of this stuff and get real happy to go back and do this, you really need to get a grasp of what's being said, because if you go in here haphazardly, because, ladies and gentlemen, it's taken us this long to figure it out, because the couple gentlemen that I've talked to here in the last couple of days, and one of the things that come up is that they were trying to do and separate themselves from that all capital name. And the question come up to them, okay, here I am the judge. I want you to explain to me the difference between your special appearance and that all capital name. And if you can convince me, I'll dismiss everything and I'll throw the prosecutor in jail on your behalf. Convince me.
And so how does one convince the judge?
So I asked him, the kid said, where did you get your information about that birth certificate being a trust? He says, well, I was told. Nope, that's not good enough.
You got to show them some black ink on white paper, don't you?
Yeah. So you don't have an answer. So you put a defense in knowing that you could not back or support your defense. And you wonder why you got your butt hung. Now let me tell you where the information is at. And he crept. The thing of it is, we're finding out judges are going sideways.
Explain yourself. What do you mean?
What I mean by going sideways is they're coming in to where now they're going dead silent on this, and they're trying to find a way around it and a way out of it by tricking you and manipulating you to get you to agree that you are a person or a man in that courtroom, and all your comment is according to you. You have jurisdiction over the person because this is your legal definition. Show how it applies to me as a living flesh and blood man. Show me the definition that applies to me. Well, you don't say I have jurisdiction over. Show again, because the legal system has defined man to mean this and this and this and this, and a human being is this and this and this and this. Show me where it says a living flesh and blood man.
Yeah, you'll never see those words.
No, you won't. You'll see all kinds of things, because the response is that your legal system has changed deliberately and intentionally through fraud and deception, changed the terminology of all this stuff that we were brought up with to believe this and that, and you've changed the entire definition. So we are, through fraud and deception, you're trying to trick us and manipulate us.
Right, but they would say it's really not fraud and deception. It's, couldn't you read that those definitions didn't apply to you? Well, the normal person couldn't.
Well, that's the whole point. Now they're coming back into ignorance, but now it comes into an argument on their side because the moment they come up, well, this is frivolous and unintelligible. Excuse me, frivolous and unintelligible? Are you not an attorney or a lawyer? Well, yes. Do you not have a law degree? Well, yes. Were you not taught law in school? They're either going to say, no, they wasn't. They was taught theory and concept, or they're going to say, yes, they were taught law. But it doesn't matter which answer they have. The bottom line boils down to, then you should understand that these are your legal definitions of how you're supposed to approach and give this court jurisdiction.
Yep.
Well, I didn't know this. Excuse me. Ignorance is not an excuse, because is this not why you drugged me into this courtroom? Because maybe I didn't know something, and you're saying ignorance is no excuse, but yet you got a law degree, and you've got a law firm, and you've got a nice little bar card that says that you're intelligent, and you're telling me that you don't know? You need time to go research?
Yeah.
Doesn't this prove you being incompetent? Ladies and gentlemen, there's so much here for you to play with and to go with on this. But before you do it, ladies and gentlemen, get your act together on this. Know what you want to say. Have it in your head where you understand it. And I realize some of you people, you work for a living, and I really do understand that. But I understand this. When you're walking into this is not a game. Your livelihood and your life depends on it. And it would be best for you to walk in here with the best ammunition that you could have for a defense on your side of the fence. Because the more you have more answers than they've got questions, then they really don't have no place to run and no place to hide. And this is why we're talking. If we do this in an in-camera type hearing, privately, the chances of maybe getting your cases dismissed may be a little higher, even though it's not on the record. At this point in time, it really doesn't matter whether it's on the record, as long as you get your case dismissed and you walk out of this unscathed, but you ask for restitution because you are entitled to restitution on this. Because now if they don't want to give you restitution, now we bring them back in their flesh capacity, and we sue them personally for damages and slander of defamation of character. So it would be better for them to deal with us and just let us walk at this point, because if we can walk it and explain it, it would really be much better for them to just say, you are 1% out of the 300 million, and we just soon let you have a real nice day, and we apologize, and here's restitution.
Right, because the odds on a whole mess of people doing that are almost zero.
Exactly.
Now, I think part of what you're saying, Rod, is we have to know where we stand, who we are, and what we are in opposition to them.
Exactly, but we also have to force them to tell us what they are charging.
Oh yeah. I mean, those qualifications I just gave. Don't get into this whole court situation if you don't know who you are, where you stand, and what you are. And likewise, if you don't know what they are and where they stand, you're screwed.
That's the biggest thing here. You really have to know who they are, where they stand, and what their restrictions are and what their definitions are, because their definitions are totally taken out of context to what you and I were taught out here. And this is why when you talk to a lawyer or an attorney, they'll sit here and tell you the legal world is an entirely different world with no concept or part of this world. It's an entirely different world. And until you can understand that, and it's taken me a long time, once you understand that, now you can stand your ground on this, because it's the process of have the prosecutor. Don't deal with the judge. Have the prosecutor, because he is the one that has to bring the burden of proof. He is the one that has to set the jurisdiction. He is the one that has to sit here and give the court a means of hearing the case over the issue. It isn't up to the judge to step in and say, I'm going to take, well, the moment he does, then technically he is required to step off the bench, get rid of the robe, and come down and play prosecutor. And you will find these judges, because once you start stumping the prosecutor, they will take over on the prosecutor's side, because you stumped the prosecutor and they got to try to get through this to cover his butt. Well, technically that judge cannot do that, because now he's practicing law from the bench.
But the rules are a little different in an in-camera hearing, correct?
Exactly, but it still comes back into, even the judge, even on the in-camera hearing, the prosecution still has the burden on their side of providing this. And now if the judge is going to talk, now you can corner the judge. If you're going to speak on behalf of the prosecution, then you're required to sit here and show me where the legislative law is that gives you the authority over the flesh and blood side of this thing. If you're going to speak up, then you got to have the answer. And if you don't, then you don't have a case here. You need to dismiss this case immediately.
But I think the point you're trying to make about the in-camera is it's much easier to do it in the in-camera setting rather than open court, because they're not going to want to be debating and discussing this stuff in open court, and they won't do it. They'll just say, contempt of court on you, the defendant, right?
Well, they're going to try to, but now it comes back in. This isn't contempt of court. Prosecution has failed to provide the burden of proof that they had an injury here.
Right. But they don't want to do that in open court. They might do it in an in-camera, right?
Exactly. But see, again, like I said, they're operating under threat, under intimidation, under coercion, and twisting and breaking your arm to get a point across.
Absolutely. In open court.
In open court. And the thing of it is, ladies and gentlemen, what we're getting into, this is a very, very serious issue. This is not for the timid or the weak-hearted to walk in and go do this. This is only for those of you that have experience and background and can sit and walk and talk on this. And if you do not have that ability, don't get involved in this. It may be better for you just to pay the fine for right now and go back and learn. But part of this, I'm going to tell you right now, is this stuff is very, very hard on a marriage. It's hard on a relationship. I just got a phone call from a good friend of mine that after about 4.5 years, they're parting company because his counterpart cannot handle any of this.
And that will often happen.
Yes, it will. It cannot handle this. It's easier to be blind and be a sheep than it is to sit down and go through all this. This is hard. It really, truly is. It is hard on you to go through this. It's hard on your counterpart because of what you're doing. And the fact that we've got as many ladies on here as what we have, in one way surprises me, but on the other side, it's like Karen Huda said here and said, her husband does not get involved. She does, her husband don't. Some cases the husbands do and the wives don't. And we've got some teams on here, a husband and wife team, that are fantastic, that they actually work together and they support one another.
Yeah, the big problem is once we learn something or find something out, we can't let it go. But the other person that's your counterpart, your better half or whatever, and they haven't understood what's going on, that's where the conflict comes in.
Exactly, because my problem of it is I've gotten in so deep into this, it's awful hard for me to back out now, but we have come down to the place to what we have heard and what we have done. We have whittled down one of them big redwood trees out there in California, one of them big sequoia trees. We whittled it down to a toothpick. And it's taken me a long time to whittle this thing down to the size of a toothpick.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of people, when these calls first started back in 2007 or so, they were thinking that this whole thing was, whatever controversy was going to be solved, in the next couple of 3 weeks or a month. No. It takes years because they built up this labyrinth around us. That it takes this long to whittle that sequoia down to a toothpick, right?
Exactly, and that's what I have been doing. I have been whittling this thing down. We find a big tree, and then we keep whittling it down until we can find the shortest route to solving this problem. But we've never backtracked, but we have sit down and took it from the top of the tree right down to the root, down to the seed of what created the tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that takes some time to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And the thing of it is, majority of the people out here on these calls and doing this stuff, they're not interested. They want the quick, fast way of coming in. And it's like a couple of people have told me down here at the house, he says, Rod, the difference that we're seeing, majority of these people and we are trying to trim the branches of the tree. You, on the other hand, are going after the root to bring it down. I said, well, yeah, that's the difference. I just assume drop the tree and then trim the branches.
Yeah, absolutely. We want this over with once and for all. Out of here.
Yeah, and that is the thing. And for those that are with the government that is listening in on this, if you've been listening here long enough, then you know this is not really something that's coming from the inside, because we have told you where this information was at in your own books, in your own writing. So this is not something that, like with Snowden and these other people that actually worked for the government and came out and blew the whistle. We are bringing this stuff out of your books through research that we have done, not being part of the agency or any part of the government where we was given it. We're just bringing this stuff out because here it is in black, white, on paper.
That's right. So it's not like we're stealing inside information, are we, Rod?
No, we're not. That's the whole thing here. And I think that's what's got them more worried, is that they didn't figure anybody would ever sit down and work it down and figure this out the way I have. But if it wasn't for the people out here sending me documentation, sending me different information, and listening to some of these other videos, what people thought, if it wasn't for this, I never would have been able to figure it out.
Oh, it's
so,
definitely.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot here, but we just right down to the nitty-gritty on all this of sitting here showing that if we would go in and challenge the corpus delicti side of this thing and make them validate which name and who the name belongs to that they're using, is that all cap? Is that a trust name? Okay, so now you are suing the trust. You're trying to embezzle the money out of the trust, because now we can go back and show where that trust received X amount of dollars to the state under the Social Security Act, and you're trying to embezzle it now.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be on my behalf, the living man's behalf.
Exactly. I'm supposed to be a part register in this. You're the trustee, but I am to have an interest in this, and you got to bring me in order for you to embezzle it, but you gave me a mouthpiece and told me I am gagged and I can't sit down and say shit. And this lawyer sit here and gave you consent to get in and sell me out, but yet when I walk in, because I never entered my appearance and I never made a distinction from the all cap, and said, okay, here's the all cap, this is the government registered trade name. I now am going to come in as a third party of interest or injured party as a American national, flesh and blood man. The requirement is to enter my appearance in as a flesh and blood man. We never came in and made the distinction by entering our appearance from that all capital name, the real flesh and blood. We just walked in, filed paperwork under that all capital name. We never told the court the difference. So now, because we came in as the trust, because they can't hear us, we remain silent. The judge, the prosecutor, they did their little deal. The other side never showed up. So now we can confiscate money out of the account.
By you, on your recent filings, showing the all capital, the defendant being the all capital government trade name, and also the third party of interest being a living, breathing man, and both of the names look strangely familiar, don't they?
Yes, they do. They look strangely familiar. It's just a little bit of difference in spelling, but they are identical, but it because of you. So we need to make that third party intervener into this thing. But what we need to do is do an enter of appearance. You just can't follow in because whenever Carl entered that case in Boston on behalf of Jeff Brown, he didn't file paperwork in and says, "Okay, I'm Carl Weston, and I'm gonna put me in here, and I'm gonna be part of this as a third party." He had to file an enter of appearance first. Before he could be a third-party intervener. He had to let them know, I'm entering my appearance. And ladies and gentlemen, that's something we've never done.
But we now know about it, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And it's imperative that we now know about it.
Exactly, because now it's imperative that we now make the system defined all the parties that's in this. And if the judge sits down and says, we're not going to allow you to file an end of appearance, we're going to throw you out, then they have just thrown the case out because the names are one and the same. So if they throw you out for an end of appearance as a third party in this, then they've dismissed the case.
Now, I hadn't quite thought of it like that. Do you think it's going to come down to that?
I think if we start doing this, and they start realizing that we're asking for the corpus delicti to be identified as this is the name here of the trust and I am the flesh and blood, we need to identify who is being sued. Is the trust being sued as the state is the trustee over the trust, or am I being sued? And if that's the case, then you get the wrong name up there.
You know, actually there's been, God, that goes back years. My ears are smoking tonight. I've been away from this so long. You remember that healthy lady years ago talking? What's her name? I know you guys know him. She came on a call.
You're talking about
not
VK
Tammy
Durham?
Pepper.
Talking about her trust that she had. And she made a statement, I remember, telling us, Rod and I think it might have been on a private call. Anyway, that's been years ago, but she kept talking about this trust. And, of course, back then, I didn't know what in the world she was talking about. But
Oh, you talking about VK Durham?
Yeah. Yeah, because she got into some of this, what Rod was sharing tonight, and I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, you know, this is going back full circle here.
Well, we've had a lot of breadcrumbs along the trail, and some of them are now yielding a pretty good meal.
And see, that's the whole thing, ladies and gentlemen. What Harvey said here said, we had a lot of breadcrumbs along the trail. You have to remember all these breadcrumbs because you don't know where they are going to fit in what we're doing. And I guess I am blessed to a certain extent that I have this ability to be able to piece this stuff together this way, and most people don't have.
Connect the dots.
Yeah. But that's the secret of this stuff. If we now could go back in, because we have to enter an appearance under the flesh and blood side, and now we have to make the system define who and what the corpus delicti is. Because like I said, we now can prove that that name is a trust. It's an estate. We can prove that it has received money to the state.
Well, we're going to see what that federal judge up there in Boston does next week, filing that mandamus in.
All right, well, Rod, corpus delicti, what does that mean in English?
Corpus delicti is that you are sitting here asking, where is the injured party? Where is the body that got hurt, threatened, damaged? To where a habeas corpus is you're asking that body to be brought forward.
Okay, right. I just wanted that made clear for people because we throw these terms around, you know.
So when they come back and say, well, Mr. Klaas, there is no injury here, you broke the law. That is no, wait a minute. A sheet of paper cannot bring a claim against me. Well, the state can because you broke their statutes. Good. Let's you and I talk about the statutes. Let's talk about the statutes being broke on your side that brought me into this courtroom to start with. Let's talk about the felonies that you've already committed. So we now have to deal with your charges because you were required to come in here with clean hands before you laid claims against me. You've got more felonies on your side than I have.
I didn't think District of Columbia was a state.
It's defined as a state and it's defined as a territory, right, Rod? Depends on where you look.
And it's defined as a corporation.
That's right.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you know, the quote-unquote District of Columbia thing, it's just mind-boggling what they've done to us.
Oh, I agree. I'm sure Rod agrees.
Yeah, but ladies and gentlemen, like I said, tonight with what we're getting into, what we've got in the past several nights on talking about this, ladies and gentlemen, you really need to grasp the understanding of this. Because the implication of this is absolutely mind-boggling, but it's also absolutely fraudulent embezzlement on their side when there has really never been a crime committed in the way that they're bringing you into court. Like I said, if they were to bring you in, let's sit here and say that you committed a murder. The prosecution would have to come in where the state is representing the victim here. They would actually have to have the victim's name on here, not the state of. Because number one, stop and think what I'm going to say here. The state of, you will never find an address for the state of, but yet they have your address. They have all the means of contacting you, but the plaintiff in this thing, there is never an address. It's always a fictitious entity. So you've got a fictitious entity with no way of contacting, no way of sitting down and making direct conversation with them. You have to go through a third party, an intervener, that is speaking on behalf of its client that has no address and does never show up in a courtroom.
Yeah. It's pretty screwed up, ain't it?
Yeah, it is, but yet we've never looked at it from this point of view, and we have never sit back and pushed this. And this is what I have been pushing here in my paperwork in D.C.
Boy, Thursday's going to be an interesting day, I would suspect.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be very interesting because I tell you what, I had the public defender call me here Thursday, finally called me. And we talked. And I asked him, and my wife asked him, he said, what is my defense? What are you putting up for a defense for me? He said, Rod, you don't have a defense.
Yeah, but Rod knows he has a defense, but the attorney says, no, you don't have a defense. And the reason is the attorney can't bring it up or he'll lose his bar card, right?
Exactly. And we brought this up. We mean, I have a Second Amendment. He says, you can't use this in D.C. I said, yes, I can. Did you not tell me that the court is an Article III court? If it is an Article III court, then it comes under Article III, Section 2. The Constitution, the laws, the treaties, all this stuff can be brought up as my defense, act of Congress. He said, well, Rod, I can't use these.
Yeah, because I'll lose my bar card.
Exactly.
So then why am I using you as my defense attorney?
And that's what I asked her. I said, now, my wife turned around and she said, look, I'm not very smart in any of this, and I really don't know any of this stuff that Rod's doing. But she says, I know enough to know. When I sat there and the prosecutor and the judge asked the prosecutor, well, I don't know. I have to check into this. I need to get back with you. They said, it didn't sound like he was very smart and very intelligent.
No, he was backpedaling is what they were doing.
Exactly. I said, now, wait a minute. I said, is it not an issue that ignorance of the law is no excuse in a court? He said, well, that's exactly right. Rod, ignorance is no law. It's no excuse. I said, then why can't you put up a defense that the prosecution does not know anything, and therefore he has no claim? Oh, that's right. You can't because you don't know either. I said, what am I being charged? I said, who is the corpus delicti? I said, you keep asking, Rod, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know what you mean, corpus delicti. I said, who is the party that was harmed? He said, Rod, you broke the statutes. You broke the city law. I said, whoa, wait a minute.
They're not an injured party.
I said, you're telling me that I'm being charged for a code violation? He says, that's exactly what you're being charged under. I said, we better back up here. I said, you better think about this. He says, what do you mean? I said, did you and the prosecutor not take an oath to the Constitution that you swore that you would uphold and defend and you would protect the laws of this country? He says, yeah. I said, let's talk about the felonies you guys just committed. And I started running down the felony list. I said, don't you think you should be charged because you breached your contract for wages and you're accepting compensation based on a fraudulent oath? I tell you what, he went dead silent on me.
No, he didn't know what the hell the answer was.
Exactly, because you can't charge me for a statutory violation whenever you're committing a felony on your side of the fence. And I tell you what, this is a hell of a defense on this side of this thing. And the judge goes, well, we're not going to go. You have to go there because if a statutory violation is a criminal charge, and you have to charge the prosecution because they breached their contract, they breached the trust of that office, they've committed perjury and accepted paycheck based on fraud.
And how did they do that, Rod?
The moment they sit here and they swore that they would uphold and defend and protect the Constitution and protect the people's rights, and they sit here and say, well, we're going to go against the Second Amendment, and we're going to go against the full faith and credit, and we're going to go against the search warrant side, and we're going to go against equal protection under the law. The moment they go against, they swore that they would hold. This is all part of the Constitution. They swore that they would uphold and protect and defend.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
They can't come back and say, well, we didn't realize this. Excuse me, are you not a lawyer? Are you not trained in law? Are you telling me now that you are incompetent? Ladies and gentlemen, there is ways, if you would just think about some of this stuff and understand, we're not being nasty here. We really, truly not are trying to be nasty, but ladies and gentlemen, they don't play fair.
And they don't make sense either.
No, they don't, because they're coming back in with all this stuff. It's just totally unintelligible. We don't, because he kept telling me, Rod, I don't know where you're getting this information. What do you mean full faith and credit? Where are you getting this stuff? Did you bother reading the Constitution under Article 4, Section 1 and 2?
No. When I went to law school, we really didn't, touch too much on the Constitution.
Okay, let's talk about Title 42, 1981, equal protection under the law.
Well, again, that really wasn't an area that we got into.
That's exactly what Harvey is laying out here is exactly their response. That is exactly their response. So how can they bring charges in law when they do not even understand the written law the way it is written?
And who the law applies to.
Exactly.
Who the code, the rule, or the regulation applies to.
This, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot here that it doesn't take a whole lot of intelligence to come back in of what we've been talking on here tonight and Tuesday night for you to put up a defense in a courtroom against them and hold them off for them to have to produce something they're not capable of producing. They're not capable of producing. They can't. The problem is they've done it for so long.
And gotten away with it for so long because we were ignorant.
Exactly.
No longer as ignorant as we were.
Yes. Our main problem still comes back into we do not have the enforcement to hold their feet to the fire. But see, that enforcement would come when the people start walking in and hammering this very topic. When they start seeing floods of people coming in, it's like Richard Cornforth, 80,000 people put a stop to prohibition. It's going to take people coming in and forcing the issue for them to change their ways of doing it. It's going to take the people. But the problem of it is you need better teachers out here. You need people who is coming down here and educating and giving you the information on all this and laying it all out.
Well, we got one here we're listening to right here.
You know, and I'm not bragging and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I tell you what, because what I've listened to other people and what I have seen they're short on is how I'm coming up with the information to fill their empty spots. But ladies and gentlemen, it really takes you to understand. It's going to take you to walk in and go head to head with this stuff. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether it's a traffic case. It doesn't matter whether it's child support. It doesn't matter whether it is a divorce. It doesn't matter whether it is a criminal activity. It doesn't matter what it is. This would apply to every aspect of everything. They have to produce. And once you go back and you show where the state is a third party in this, and the state has received the benefits of this, now when are they going to start picking up the bill? When are they going to start paying the tab? This is what's going to take time to come back in and prove. This is what's going to take time to come back and push. All right, we've got a couple people on here. Let me bring them in here real quick because we're getting on here past the hours. Al, go ahead, Al.
I'm just going to cancel it, Rod. Thank you.
All right. Clarence, go ahead. We tried the last time. Go ahead. One more time.
Hey, thanks. How you doing, Rod?
Good.
Harvey and everyone else. I was looking over your last filing that you did. You remember I sent you the thing about David Windmiller that you've been talking about a little bit?
Yeah.
If you get a chance, we'll probably should talk online because I was looking over your last filing that you did, trying to let them know, in response to the weapons charges.
Okay.
And right off the bat, I was like, uh-oh, with a couple of things that I saw. If you're gonna go by what he was talking about, and I'd like to see what you thought about my thoughts on that, like on a private type conversation setting, if that's okay with you.
Okay,
I
yeah.
can go over it now, but it's kind of lengthy.
Well, we get some feedback. You get your.
Hold on, let me see if this will help you.
We get feedback.
Yes.
Turn the volume down.
How's that? Is that better?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, how much of it did you understand what I said?
Yes, start over again, and we'll bring it back up again.
Okay. I was just saying I'd like to talk to you guys on a private call. You call, or you call, and Harvey or what have you, or just you. Whoever's involved in doing the paperwork, because if we're going to go by any of the correction, instruction, communication stuff like what David Miller was talking about, I've been studying it for a good little while now. There's a reason why I sent you that link. And I sent them a couple of emails, and I got some positive responses. So I think I'm doing it pretty good and understanding it kind of correct. And I wanted to see if you were interested in some. I saw a couple of things that if he read it from what he's teaching, he would say, don't do this, but do this. So I kind of wanted to show you a couple of things there on that filing that you did in response to the weapons charge.
Yeah.
I just pulled it up. I went to Dropbox a while ago while you were talking. I pulled it up here, right here in the beginning here.
Okay, we can. Now, I take positive criticism because if we can tighten it up, we tighten it up on these people. Because I had a gentleman that I worked on a document here the other day because I was in rush to get it out. Instead of I used the word who. He says I need to use the word whom. But when I had Carvey correct it, we went back from whom to who. So it goes back in depending on who is writing it on the interpretation of the language that we're using. But see, part of the problem of it is, and don't take what I'm saying wrong here because I talked to a couple of people. Our problem is that we're trying for that absolute correct grammar perfection. But you need to remember something. The most perfect man alive did not win his court case. He was crucified. So even though we may have all of our T's crossed, I's dotted, absolute perfect grammar, it still goes back into that judge. Is he going to be honorable, or is he going to be, a Pontius Pilate here, and instead take him out and crucify him? That's part of our problem that we're running into. I believe that we need to get everything as tight as we possibly can, make it as good as possible, but absolute perfection, they're not going to allow absolute perfection, because they crucified Jesus.
Well, the thing about where I was going, the reason I studied that stuff what he was talking about, correction and instruction, is because it actually goes right to the heart of what your spirit is about what you got taught from so long to now with you and Carl and them.
Yeah.
And it's talking about painting them into a corner and using their own published words. A lot of what Dave Miller or Judge Miller talks about is going back to the Latin and stuff and the Greek and understanding the origins of words when you use them and how to use it, and if you shoot yourself in the foot when you use a term versus not using a term, or a punctuation versus not using a punctuation.
Yeah.
And what happens is if you put that, like say for instance, because those at the very beginning where we got United States District Court and you got District of Columbia there.
Yeah.
At the beginning of your suit here in response, like right here, you got United States District Court. United as an adjective. So if you understand what he's talking about, it's going to go adjective, pronoun, and then district is going to be an adverb, court is going to be a verb. And there's never a verb court in their dictionary. So when you point out to the judge, he's going to start getting antsy, like, okay, well, what's your point? Because I don't want to go over grammar in the court. But we can't get past that, Your Honor, if we can't even go to a dictionary and say what you're saying is true. We don't have nothing in common. And then secondly,
with this kind of a thing. Yeah, I mean, it's all throughout. Everything I've written, everything everybody's written that's not aware of what you call syntax.
Yeah.
All right, caller, may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Have you used any of this successfully in your court controversies?
No, because I try to stay out of court. And
all right, well, Rod is in court.
Right.
And yes, anything that could help or contribute would be good. But trying to re-educate the people that are trying to that need to read these documents on that Rod is filing into the court, to try and re-educate those people to read them another way, I would say that it's probably a good thing that you're not in court. No, I'm not trying to be vicious.
Right. I received that because that's actually a misunderstanding about what I'm trying to convey. Because I'm not trying to tell you that we're going to teach them anything. What I'm going to do is do what Rod's doing, like I just said before. When you point out to them that what they write, they can't write. First of all, the jurisdiction and everything that you got in the court and the procedures and all, the courtroom is your paperwork. It's not the building that you go to. And the paperwork is like an order of operation. If one thing comes, first comes the egg, then comes the chicken. Or you get the created chicken, then comes the egg. What's your faith? What do you believe? If you believe in God, do you believe the chicken came first? Or do you believe God created the egg and then the chicken came out of the egg? It's all in your little, kind of your mindset. So what we do is you become God on paperwork. You take authority or jurisdiction on paperwork. You say that I'm not going to use united because it means this, and then you put all your terms, you define everything like you do when you see like on the IRS website, and everybody's got publicized definitions, they call it. But that's a negative term already in itself. You prefer terms. So what you do is you
Well, like I said, we need to sit down, and I agree that we need to adjust so much of this stuff, but I also agree that, to a certain extent of what we're getting into, we need to have been taught this at a young age. My granddaughter's 8. She needs to be taught this proper grammar at 8 years.
Exactly.
I'm 60. For me now, being involved in the middle of a court case, for me to have to go back in and tell the judge I need X amount of years to learn this language before I can come before your court ain't going to happen.
And he'll also say to you, why don't you get a lawyer?
That's exactly right.
Hey, you know what? When they do that, that's where Rod can rip them apart, because what will happen is those people, like when I tell my mom some of this stuff, because, I've been doing it for a long time. Here, if you could going on 2 years down learning some stuff. And, she says some of the kind of thing what Rod just said, because she's like 63 or 64. But when you take the reason I was saying you're going to take jurisdiction on the paperwork, when you take your jurisdiction on the paperwork, that's already there in their corner. When you file that via registered mail to the correct place, which is going to be doing it to the proper postal court venue, when you do that, you're going to be bypassed. You went to the district court, all the federal court, you went to their boss. And when they give you your file stamp, whatnot, and then you took jurisdiction over that, then, according to Judge Miller, like I said, because like Harvey pointed out, I hadn't done all this yet. I'm all going in. I talked to him on the phone. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and I asked some questions. Because I'm not going to, like you said, you don't do stuff because you'll get your head chopped off. So I'm not going to do anything until I know if they do this, then I'll be able to do that. Or if they do that, then my next response is this, so I don't have to blow these other people's phone up or be wind up calling Rod. Hey, Rod, man, what do I do, man? It's my one phone call. So I don't play that game. I'm 36. I'm educated myself, and I see that Rod has got him on the run here. But the reason they slip and slide is because they got wiggle room. If you're gonna understand what they're doing with the words. With the words is like word magic. That's why they call it spelling in school. It's magic. to them. Whatever they put on the paperwork, that's their world. Whatever they write on a dollar or whatever, if you write something on it, then they want to charge you. If you go to the bank and they want you to buy a house or a car, and then you start changing the words, no, you can't do that. Oh, you messed it up. We'll start over. We'll get a new one. Because it has to be their little format the way they want it, because they're trying to take jurisdiction over you, trying to be in contract with them.
Let me ask you here, caller.
Go ahead.
Is David Wynn's a judge, right?
Yes.
Does he hold any courtroom sessions?
Yes.
Is there
But what he is mainly, like say if we talk with him, because I was thinking while you were talking about some of these things, it's actually kind of funny because I was like, God, he'd love that, he'd eat that up. But see, he would, when you watch, I know you watched a couple of videos and stuff.
Yeah.
You got to be a person that can listen to a lecture. Because if you can't listen to the lecture, you'll go to sleep or or whatever. And maybe it's bland to some people. I find it kind of interesting because I'm trying to learn, and I don't. When he goes to talking about some other stuff, trying to lighten up the mood or whatever, I just kind of try to get above that. But what he is plenipotentiary, and that is, I don't know if you would have said traveling judge. It's like the judge's boss that goes around.
All right, he's a circuit rider.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, there you go.
All right,
Is he a judge within the infrastructure?
On one of his court cases, I pulled up the court case for Hawaii, December 12th. It's a mortgage case. Him and a man and a woman against Countrywide and another one. They said the same thing what you said about the unintelligible, and they were trying to skip around with trying to figure out why they were going to dismiss.
All right, now, let's stay on point here, Matt. I'm trying to get you on a point.
Okay.
Is he a judge that will sit on the bench that I can bring a claim in to him to hear against the United States?
It's like yes and no.
That's not an answer either, because if he is a judge, then he should have a courtroom. There should be a way to have him sit on the bench as a neutral party and let us, one of us, bring a claim against the United States or one of their other judges or other employees in the same fashion that I'm in D.C. right now. There should be a way to get before him and bring charges, because if we can have him sit on the bench as a real judge and he makes a decision as a judge, not as an attorney coming in and assisting somebody, but as a judge that sits on the bench, and let me bring in a claim against the United States into his court and let him make a decision, we can solve all these problems right here, right now, tonight.
There's only two problems. There's only two problems with that I see. One is he has treaties set up so that, because if he goes, say if all the language is wrong, like the claims are that he puts on his website, which I do believe they are, right? If that's the case, then he can pretty much go just destroy the world, because everything's written on paper wrong in every language according to what was put out there. So like nobody's doing it right. So that means it's easy pickings for him if he wants. So in order to remain peaceful in the eyes of the world court, the United States court, local courts, everywhere, he only most of his claims and stuff have been filed for him that I saw was in Hawaii, which is where he became a judge at anyway. But the Hawaii circuit says that he's not in that decision where the court case before you said they're on point, I was trying to get to, that they said that though Judge claims to be a federal judge, he is not a member of this circuit. Something the court issues this warning for some kind of impersonation of what they were trying to say.
All right,
but they stopped short of saying that because he's not part of their bar card club thing. And they didn't want him to come tear their life apart. So they wanted to say something that's public. So when he gets it dismissed, because he's trying to follow the chain of command. They went there, there's 2 countrywide in them or whatnot. They knew they was going to get 12B6 and whatnot. So he could go up to the next chain. So the next chain didn't say, hey, you got to go back. You didn't even follow procedures. You skipped over people, and they could have gave you your remedy. So he took you there first. I can ask him about it.
Because if he was recognized by the International Court as a lawful judge that can sit as a circuit rider and go around the country, and he can hear cases, that we need to be able to sit down with him, even though we may not bring in the exact syntax language. The point is, he is a judge. The other side is not going to bring in syntax language because they can't even speak English well enough to walk into a courtroom. Bottom line is if he is an honest, goodness, international circuit riding judge that has absolute power to make decisions, then I would like to be able to bring this claim up to him and have a ruling on it.
But Rod, you'll need that ruling to have some strength behind it, and I just have a suspicion that the
ruling is not going to be bad, Harv. The ruling that he's got now, you're right, he needs it. What made me think of, raising my hand to speak before I had technical difficulty and I couldn't, you couldn't hear me the first time?
Yeah. I tell you what, we need to move on here a little bit, but you're answering some questions here on what we're doing. We need to tighten up the language, but it would be much better if he is a judge that will sit on a bench, that we could bring people into him and let us bring it in. Because if he's a circuit rider judge on the international side, that's exactly what we need. We need a neutral judge that's on our side that we could go to and start solving these problems on the legitimate side, not necessarily the language side, but accountability side.
Well, see, what happens if you don't do the language side, then he won't help. Because he knows that we're in there, just like you said, like I have a 16-month-old, they're set up from the birth certificate, SOE deal they got going on here, to make us all subjugated to learn how to be their subjects and learn from their schools. If you don't send them to their schools, you can't afford any kind of ones that go off a little bit as a regular man and to learn different things, then you're going to just be, kind of at their mercy and illiterate or whatever. So what he wants, which is why I've been saying and why I sent you the message again, if you take you got to learn what's wrong with your filing, or he'll help you learn what's wrong with your filing because he helped me. And then, or the students will, because he has students everywhere. Once your filing is proof, so when you go to the proper federal postal court venue up in Chicago, with your filing, registered mail, not you until, the assigned date or whatnot, they're going to see that in the world of the fiction, fraud and all, that they already agreed in the fiction and the fraud that this guy had damages and that he needs to be paid. But they're going to see that, because they know they run this thing, that, hey, look, they're trying to screw them over. No wonder they came to us. They already got a judgment. So what you would do is you would try to get a, something like a declaratory judgment, but it wouldn't be called a declaratory judgment. You'd be seeking closure, because he said declare, that means no C. So you don't want to get a declaratory judgment. You want to get something that's closure. I want this whole thing completed and finished. And you would seek for those kind of the damages and the recovery of the damages that were already awarded to you. So it's like you go in there with your arrows, and you're not even starting from scratch. You're trying to get that closure to what they've already agreed that they were wrong. And what you'll do in your claim, what Judge Miller or his students will help you do, is put the method of recovery in there.
Oh, let's move on.
Well, we just got over $20 million in judgments out of the Virginia court up there, federal court, and we didn't have to go through all that.
Well, Miss, we
I know it sounds like a lot, but that's why I told you we never. If I don't know, I try to call Rod. I'll leave him a message or something if I need to. But Rod, I don't know if you still have me on the. I left it on your voicemail. The last time about Judge Miller and all that. But if you can, I'll show you guys. Either one of you guys, if you want to, you can call me or email me, and I'll try to help as much as I can. And or you can call Judge Miller because his number is on his website and he does answer.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Just leave me another message that you was on Saturday night's call. Give me your name and your number, and I'll give you a call back. But right now, the problem of it is, like I said, for us to turn around and have to learn a crash course of absolute new English language, it'd be like trying to teach me how to speak Japanese in 24 hours. You know, you got 30 seconds to learn Japanese. You know, that ain't going to happen.
Right.
You know, but the point being of it is, if he is a international judge and he actually has a courtroom where he sits in and he makes decisions, then I understand the language deal, but on the other hand, a judge is a judge on this side, and that's something that we could work with one of his students to where we can get a conviction on a public office. It's the conviction that we're going after, not so much the clarification of precise exact wordings to get that. It's the bottom line is that he is there to uphold and pursue justice.
But he's gonna say that you ain't gonna. But he's gonna say that you can't do it because, like you just said, about 15 minutes ago, if the one person is not right, then they're not gonna give it to the other one. So what he'll do, he's gonna say, well, both of you can't read and write, and I'm not gonna do it. So that's why they're.
All right, thank you. Let me move on.
Okay, thank you.
Maine?
Hi.
Maine?
Hello.
Hi.
What a treat. I've been trying to get in touch with you for some time now. I don't know how to be real brief about this, but I've been talking at the same time that I listened to you, and many times I wanted you to just stop so I could ask you some questions.
Okay.
And what I did was I was a trustee for my parents' estate, and the court didn't like me, and for whatever reason they found that I was in the wrong for acting halfway between bad faith and good faith, and I was self-centered and contentious. And over time, 19 years, they decided that they were going to bring me into court for a judgment on this, and I thought they were going to shoot for like $80,000, but they took my Social Security number, they drew up a deed, they took my property, they reached down and they attached another property, and I just said, I can't do this anymore, I just can't do this anymore, and so I filed a claim in tort, and I named the state. I didn't name the state, I named the Franklin County Court as a defendant, I named the judge as an individual in his official capacity, and the clerk who signed the deed with the transfer tax with my Social Security number, and then the attorney. And I left out some key players, another judge, because if they dismissed this, I figured I could still go after him. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm proceeding here. And they wrote back, the Attorney General is representing the judge and the clerk, and the risk management said he has a bond for their insurance. This is like an enormous amount of time that this has gone on. Am I making any sense to you?
Yeah, okay, but tonight what we talked about going after them in their flesh and blood capacity, naming that all caps as the trade name and them as the registered agent for that, and they're in breach of their fiduciary duty. This is something I just started working on paperwork tonight.
I added that, breach of fiduciary. I added a lot of civil rights violations. I added constitutional violations, and I was in conversation with someone, and they said maybe I just need to try and find a civil rights lawyer.
Okay, now, the thing of it is, when you have filed or get ready to file your paperwork, did you put yourself down as that real party of interest in this under that flesh and blood type? Like I said, I normally would never use that, but because of what we found out, that we need to come in and make a distinction, because otherwise what the court's going to do, they're going to look at that name and say, okay, we're going to put her under the ward side of this thing, under the trust side. So we're not going to recognize her as a real being. We're going to recognize her as a fiction. This is part of the reason why we've been getting our paperwork thrown out of these courts.
My people are crazy.
Well, they're all crazy. I'm a trustee of my father's estate. And I understand
he said,
that.
We're going to put this property in the trust. I said, the trust is closed. How are you going to do that? You're going to create your own little trust? You can't create a trust for the deceased person. It doesn't work.
Well, they've already created that trust on them being alive under that Social Security that they've got paid for. That trust already exists.
No, a separate entity here. And so I'm in there on behalf of the estate.
How much is the estate?
They took it. It's gone. It's closed.
No,
it's over.
no, ma'am. Just answer my question. How much was the total estate?
I don't know. I'm gonna, off the top of my head, say $300,000.
Okay. Well, the lawyers and judges get involved and they rip you off.
They did. That's right. And what I've done is I've sued them for $20 million and said you had no right to take my property. You had no right to drag me into trial all these years. They're constitutional violations. It's a breach of contract, a breach of fiduciary duty. It's a whole string of things.
Well, you know, the attorneys file their trust, practice, and law fees, and they take everything.
And I'm going to get it back.
Well, yeah, by all
Rod
means.
help. This guy Rod, he's busy right now. You're busy, right, Rod?
Yeah, I got this case in D.C. I ain't really taking on any cases until I get this thing done in D.C., because I don't want to get halfway with you and then the judge decides to be very dishonorable because I sort of irked him on what I exposed, and then I'm left hanging and can't do a thing for you, and you're out here on your own.
Yeah, I'm on my own, all right.
All right.
But
the point is,
I'm going to file a motion for a motion to amend my pleading, because they're lying through their teeth.
Where's the case at?
I filed a motion, and they got the Attorney General countered.
No, what courthouse? What courthouse?
I'm in the state of Maine, and I'm in Franklin County Court, and there is no help amongst the Maine people here.
Can you get to the docket on the court system?
I don't know what you mean. I'm in U.S. District Court.
You're in U.S. District Court.
It had been in the Franklin County Court.
Okay, so you're on PACER.
I guess so. I don't know that much about it.
Well, I'm trying to help you here.
You want a number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on.
Well, just email me. Send me an
you?
email, and I'll get back to you.
Do not give your phone number over this line. We don't want your phone number on here. Have write down Carl's email address, and you contact him privately, and you guys talk about this. Or have her, Carl, you give her your email, and her write it down, and you have her
contact. The government knows so much about me. I'm going to give you my email address.
No, here's mine. I'm giving you mine.
All right.
Justice.
Yep.
0927 at sbcglobal.net.
S as in Sam, B as in box, G as in Grover.
C. Justice 0927 at sbcglobal.net.
All right.
Yeah, you guys talk privately and not on the air here or what we're doing, because nobody needs to get in on your business.
If you want to know about me, just Google my name and you'll have pages of it.
What's your name? Carl what?
Weston, W-S-T-O-N.
I'm going to win this case, you guys.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Think positive.
You should have seen his face when I handed it to him that day.
Yeah.
I'll bet.
Oh.
Well, we've served federal judges in their offices in federal courthouses before.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be resolved in Maine. I think I'm going to have to go to Boston. It's a mess because they took jurisdiction of me wrongfully for 2 Florida trusts, and it's a mess.
What's that? Let me ask you one last question. Did your dad have a will?
No, he had a trust.
Okay, so no will, but he had a trust.
Yeah.
Okay. And they took you off the trust?
Just recently, after the whole thing was closed, everything was distributed, the judge said, put it back in the trust.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it because I already sold it and I already gave it away. So he wanted me to violate, he wanted me to do something I couldn't do, so I didn't do anything. You can't do what you can't do. That's when they decided, so we talk about judicial immunity and all these other kinds of immunity, and I read Suing the Judges, which has really been my Bible for immunity, and so it was ministerial. The judge decided he was going to carry out his buddy's order by having the lawyer draw up the deed, take my Social Security number, and take my property. And that's a ministerial act. And they're claiming that the Franklin County Court is sovereign because they're a part of the state. And I wrote back and I said, he perpetuated a crime against me. When he took my Social Security number, you're representing the wrong party. You told me when I called you, you would help me to the Attorney General who's representing the judge. So it's moving along, but I'm getting cold feet. I'm like, I need to reassess here and slow down. And, I just was trying to stop the judge that day, and it worked. It stopped him dead in his tracks.
Yeah.
But they lie. Oh, my God, they lie.
Yep. All right. Actually, you got his, get him. You guys can talk here. We need to go ahead and shut it down because it's midnight here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, dear. You have a good day.
Thank you. Good night.
Yep, good night. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope tonight with what we got talking about, we need to start not claiming that name, because too many people don't claim it. We need to start challenging it and have them show how and who it belongs to. Is it a trust name? Is it an estate name? Does it belong to an animal? Does it belong to a corporation? Or is that a living, breathing man? We need to distinction who is the corpus delicti in this courtroom. And like I said, this is an avenue that we've never tried, we never pushed. Because just like everything else, when we got talking about mortgages, never claim that name, never claim that signature. Oh, wait a minute, back up here. With what we've just recently found out, now the issue in the bankruptcy or the foreclosure is, excuse me, did I or did I not sign that document? Yes, you did. Right here's your signature. Did the state not receive federal grant money on behalf of that name? Now think about what we're saying here. Did the state not receive federal grant money on behalf of that name under a trust? Yes, they did. Then why is not the state of in this courtroom being sued? Why did you drag me in here? I already gave you the signature. You should have taken it to the state and collected on it. Why didn't you collect it off the state? Or did the state sit here and refuse to pay you, in which half I will be more than glad to be a witness on behalf of the bank to testify, yes, I signed that, and the state was required to pay and zero out the debt. Now think about what we're talking about here tonight. We've always been told to run away when we should be embracing it and start making the issue that the state is sitting on the Social Security funds. Each fiscal year, the state is receiving X amount of dollars on behalf of your name that they're supposed to be paying and discharging the debts. That's why these lawyers and judges who started teaching these foundations, deny the name, never accept the name, because when you don't, after so many years, they now can go back in and do a lost and found or an abandonment. Basically, what they're claiming is that is now abandoned. Now it's open for them to receive for abandoned claims. This is why IRS has got an abandonment form. After 7 years, if that money isn't claimed, they go back in and file the form as a lost and found. Well, we're going to accept abandonment, and they go fill their pockets of it. That's why they don't want you accepting that name. And we don't know how to use all the forms, but the bottom line is, once we make the issue, and then make the issue that the state has been paid, then why is not the state being held accountable to pay the mortgage? That's like this lady here. Instead of them going after her, she's got trust money on behalf of her dad sitting in the trust under his name for however old he was, that she should be entitled to. Not them stealing the trust. They should be paying the trust. They should be giving her. She needs to be going in and getting what was entitled of what the state received on behalf of her dad, and that should be given into the trust to be given to her. So think about what we're talking about here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. This is, like I said, this is some new avenues, and as we come up with new concepts, new ways of thinking on some of this stuff, of what we are putting into it, these are avenues that we can go back and play with these people and start doing accountability on them.
And there's over $20 billion in assets that the Department of Justice is sitting on that is owed to the people from seized and forfeited property. That's amazing.
That is.
And nobody's claiming it. Oh, well, we'll wait 5 or 10 years, and when nobody claims it, then we'll
split it up among ourselves, and we'll fill our pockets and go out and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we've been taught. We've been taught by these lawyers and judges that started out with these seminars, never claim the name. And the reason why is because they did not want you to claim the abandonment on it. Like I said, we could not prove the birth certificate side till we got into the D.C. vital statistics under Chapter 2, under that 7-201, Section 10, where it says the person is a trust and an estate. That's the same thing under Title 26, at 7701. The word person is a trust and estate. Until we found that, we could not tie the name into the trust. Now we can. Like I said, we now need to go back in and make that all cap, the trust name, the word, come in as that third party of interest or injured party and bring a claim. Okay. All right, Mama just walked in and she told me it's past midnight. I need to get off. But ladies and gentlemen, think about what we've talked about here tonight and get in.